I mean, the first one I kind of mentioned product market fit. We're calling it positioning because we're referring to it as positioning because we know we're speaking to revenue leaders and in some cases entrepreneurs and founders, CEOs. But by the time a revenue leader has their hands on it, there's probably, I mean, ideally there probably should be, you probably should have product market fit, but you often don't, or maybe you have product market fit in one market, but it's not well positioned. And so framing it up as positioning within that context just made it a little bit more actionable for the sales leader, because that's who we're really speaking to, is the sales and revenue leader. And so the first piece is positioning, and it's all to do with your product market fit, the market you're in, what makes you unique, how relevant is that to the audience that you're selling to. And then once and honestly, like if this is that like Monopoly step, like do not pass go, do not collect $200, right? Like if you don't have product market fit, everything downstream is going to be multiplied by 0. So if you want to take these 3 sections and like multiply these 3, score of 1 to 10, multiply them together, that's going to be your overall effectiveness. And then however you could nail like to aces all the way down when you get to the playbook. But if you get a 0 in one of these 3 things, a 0 out of 10, or even a 1 or 2 or 3 out of 10, it's going to have a downstream impact on the performance of your entire team. And it's going to frustrate the shit out of your revenue team. And I know because I've had my revenue team do this for things that don't have product market fit. And I think Sarah remembers specific campaigns where we're like, Sarah, this is a thing. This is a real market. There's an audience. We've got customers here. And you went and like hustled hard. And you came back like a month later. I mean, obviously you didn't go on this journey in the desert and then come back empty handed with no water, just like beaten up. But it was similar. It was similar.
Oh, that way.
Yeah. And so that go ahead.
No, you go.
That first piece is positioning, right? And the second piece is the pace. And this piece recognizes that companies have different amounts of money to invest. You have different financial strategies. I'm going to talk to a bootstrap company very differently than a company that just raised $108 million. Like it's the same methodology, but you're going to apply it differently. You're going to spend differently. It's a very different mindset. And so all the things in that pace are really just calibrating what is from the point of, okay, based in the context of your positioning, of your market, of your product market fit, and the financial strategy of your company, how much do you want to invest? How quickly do you need to move? What can you afford to do, right? If we're talking about, you have a product that's worth $1,000 a year, you're probably not talking sales development. Right? If you're talking about a product that's $1 million a year, we're probably talking closer to that like ABM style of sales development. If it's more towards the $25,000 annual contract value, then we're probably talking more personalized at scale. And so the pace is is where you kind of blend the market with how much you want to spend and how quickly you want to move, and figuring out what styles of sales development you can afford to implement, how much you can afford to invest to acquire a customer. And then the practice is this is where the rubber meets the road. This is that last step where it's like, how well does the team work together? Do you have all the things that you need from the marketing, from the sales, from the revenue, from, however you structure your revenue, your product team? Does your website say the things, that, you're going to email a prospect and they're going to go look at your website and be like, oh yes, this website is congruent with the email that I saw. And like, you're probably listening, or you could be listening and thinking, shock, like who would do that? Lots of people do that. This is why it exists as part of the methodology. And that's the very, very high level. I'll shut up in a minute and let us get into some of the tactics, and we can come back to some of the deeper details of this later. But really that's if you were to give yourself a score, and just pause for a minute and give yourself a score of 1 to 10 or 0 to 10, because if you don't have one of these things, multiplies by 0. If you don't have product market fit, multiplies by 0. And just, okay, 1 out of 10, 1 out of 10, multiply them together. You get a score out of, I can't do math, but let's just say you get a score out of whatever, and then figure out what the total score is. I really should have done the math of like 10 times
30.
10 times 10.
Oh, they multiply by each other.
I was like, how many zeros? Yeah, 10 times 10 times 10, 1,000, right?
10 times 10 is
10
100.
times 10 is 100.
Times 10 is 1,000. Yeah.
1,000. Okay. I was like, It's
not big math guys here on this podcast.
You can
not a math podcast.
It's hard to speak and do math at the same time when you're trying to carry a thought.
You don't have to tell me, Colin.
Okay, so you're going to get a score out of 1,000. This is a math. Yeah, thank God it's not a math podcast. You get a score out of 1,000, and that's like divided by 1,000. That's your relative effectiveness, right? So if you get 799, that turns into 79.9%, and that's a loose indication of how the sort of maximum effectiveness that your playbook will be, right? And so just wanted to point out the absolute critical importance of these top 3 things.